podcast.
Hi everyone, this is Jason Bjork of Wall Street for Mean Street. Welcome back to another Wall Street for Mean Street podcast interview. Today's special guest is a first-time guest. She is founder and president of the Chamber of Digital Commerce. Perianne, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yes, and it took a bunch of reschedulings, but you are worth the wait. I wanted to get your insights here about what's going on in blockchain and Bitcoin. It's a lot of exciting times right now.
The industry is moving at an incredible pace. We're having an amazing time at the Chamber, keeping up with all the development.
Now, before we talk more about the future of blockchain and Bitcoin, and you have a conference coming up next month, so I want to promote that for you. I'm going, and you have a lot of great keynote speakers lined up. I want to ask you about your background. How did you find out about Bitcoin and the blockchain, and what got you interested in the blockchain?
Well, we have to take a step back. I am most interested in blockchain technology because of its monetary policy implications. So I studied economics at the University of Florida during the financial crisis. So I was studying economics during one of the most historic economic collapses in our country's history. The housing, and I'm from Florida, my entire family lives in Florida, and the housing market really devastated my family and my community. So this really hit home. Everyone I knew was impacted by this financial crisis. And as a student of economics, I had the opportunity to ask a lot of questions in terms of why was this happening? How is this happening? Why is my family, I had multiple members of my family whose houses went underwater. I saw a lot of people being displaced, people losing their jobs because the economy was taking. So that prompted a deep study for me personally, and to figure out what was wrong with our financial system. And what I found was quite frightening. So I decided to dedicate my career to economic and fiscal policy. I quickly, right after I graduated, moved to Washington, D.C. to work in monetary policy. And I first learned about Bitcoin in a briefing that I attended on Capitol Hill. I used to work as a congressional analyst for a member of the House of Representatives, who's now a member of the Financial Services Committee. So when I was first briefed on there's this digital currency out there that operates outside of any government control, I was completely fascinated by that topic. So that was really what first got me interested into this industry.
I have a similar story to how you woke up and started becoming curious and learning more about how the banking system and monetary system really worked. I was a stockbroker right before and during the 2008 financial crisis. And, I didn't have a business background. I wasn't studying that in school. So I wanted answers. My parents lost a bunch of money in the stock market as well in the past bubbles. So I know you've studied Austrian school economics as well. So you think then that learning these, outside the box stuff, I was actually going to ask you then your background when you were at school. I'm guessing the professors, some of these academics, didn't exactly have great answers for why the 2008 financial crisis happened.
You're exactly right. And I had a good friend of mine. We were study buddies, and we would kind of go toe-to-toe with the professors. A lot of what they were teaching, of course, in public school was Keynesian economic theories. And I was very frustrated that the school didn't even explain to us as students that there are other theories out there. They just introduced Keynesian economics as if it was the only theory of economics that existed. So I was very upset and disenfranchised by that. And they were not able to give me sufficient answers to why everyone I knew was struggling with the economy and what was actually causing this. And I came across a Ron Paul interview. He gave a speech on the Fed, and what he was saying actually answered my questions, and that really just led me down into to really study, what Austrian economics is. And I personally subscribe to the Austrian theory of economics. I took some classes at the Mises Institute to better understand this and to learn more. And that's very much what I believe and what I'm passionate about and fighting for and have dedicated my career towards.
Excellent. And I love Ron Paul. I've seen him speak live in person at length a couple of times. So it's a joy to see him speak. The man's just has so much energy and passion at his age. I just hope, when I'm that old that I'm that vigorous.
Yeah.
Well, Perianne, I want to ask you now about your company, the Chamber of Digital Commerce. Why did you decide to start your company, and what are the goals of the company?
I started the Chamber because I truly believe in the potential power of blockchain technology. Through my studies in blockchain, I've become completely convinced that this is the most important technological advancement that I will see in my lifetime. I believe it will help solve a lot of the problems in our financial system, including systemic risk, transparency, and financial inclusion. However, this industry, while it is very nascent, it really has some serious challenges. So back in 2013 was really, I guess, the most impactful year for Bitcoin. Bitcoin really became prominent on the international scene. At the same time, it faced some very serious issues from Mt. Gox and Silk Road and Liberty Reserve. And there were a lot of headlines in the media associating this with nefarious activity. That led to a lot of fear and anxiety and skepticism in Washington. There were multiple hearings on Capitol Hill that year. There was a senator who called for a ban on Bitcoin. It became pretty obvious to me that the industry needed a formal representative in Washington to be a resource to the policy community. And that's what the Chamber is. We promote the acceptance and use of digital assets and blockchain-based technologies. We work very closely with the industry and the policy community, providing education and advocacy to move the dialogue forward in a positive way for blockchain.
Yeah, that's good that you guys are promoting the technology like that. I mean, from the mainstream media, Perianne, it kind of seems like that Bitcoin has been treated pretty much the same way gold has been treated. So every time, Bitcoin's price dropped $100 or more, we would get these obituary articles about Bitcoin, that Bitcoin has died. And I think someone has been keeping track of all those articles from the mainstream media, Perianne, since Bitcoin went over $1. And I think there's been over 1,000 articles about that Bitcoin is dead, it's going to zero, it's useless. So I completely disagree with that, but I don't know, these people aren't objectively looking at the technology behind Bitcoin, which is the blockchain.
Yeah, I mean, that's just completely factually inaccurate. Bitcoin's market cap is at about $16 billion today. It has a greater market capitalization than many countries' fiat currencies around the world. Whether you're looking at this from a currency perspective or from the broader technology, which can be used for other uses above and beyond just currency, this is, again, what I see as the most important technical advancement that I will see in my lifetime. It is still early days. We are still building on top of this technology and really discovering how it's most going to impact the industry, but it is not dead. It is thriving, and we have a lot of big market signals that indicate that.
Excellent. Now I want to ask you, for our listeners who aren't as tech savvy, they've probably heard of Bitcoin. They've probably unfortunately heard the bias from the mainstream media about it. But what is the blockchain, and what problems does it solve, in your opinion?
Right. So I mean, when we talk about blockchain, let's first talk about Bitcoin, because that's an easier way to introduce you to the technology. Bitcoin is a digital, cryptographic, and decentralized currency. It can operate on a peer-to-peer basis, meaning users don't necessarily have to go through a third party to use the technology. There, again, are about $16 billion worth of Bitcoin currently in circulation today. Each of these transactions are recorded on a continuously growing public ledger called the blockchain. The blockchain allows for what I call radical transparency. It has been lauded by industry and regulators as breakthrough database technology. It can be used for payments, but it can be also used for other transfers of digital assets. That could be and include healthcare records, securities, identity, and many others.
So it seems like there's a lot of industries that could potentially be disrupted. I saw on your interview that you did for a documentary called The Blockchain and Us that you don't like using the term disruption for Bitcoin and blockchain technology. You prefer to call it evolution instead?
It absolutely is. And as I mentioned in that interview, it's really not helpful to try to scare everyone that this technology is going to displace entire industries. That's just not a great way to approach this. We want the incumbents, your traditional financial institutions, but also the broader Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies. We want them to invest and explore and to begin to walk down this blockchain path. And if you approach them by saying, this is going to disrupt your business, that's just going to turn people off. But it really is an evolution. So digital currencies are nothing new. The first digital currencies were introduced in the 80s. One of the biggest challenges, though, is the double spend problem. So the internet has been proved to be a great place to share information. It's not a great place to share anything of value. And one is because of that copy and paste mechanism and the double spend problem. And the blockchain technology that's used behind Bitcoin is what solves that huge issue in computer science of the double spend problem. So it's a leap, and it's been a technological advancement in terms of digital currencies, but it's an evolution. We've had many digital currencies introduced in the past. Now we finally have one that solves a lot of those major issues of why the ones that came before weren't very successful.
Yeah, I've read a number of articles trying to simplify the Byzantine general's dilemma. The first article or two I read, I didn't fully understand it. The more I read about it, the easier it sounds. But for someone, I think it's the problem in computer science has been around since computers and the internet were invented. So this has been a decades-old problem discussed in the IT community. You said you have an IT background, so I'm sure your father and your uncle and your brother had been discussing ways to solve this. A lot of people have been looking for ways to solve this because you can make a lot of money and maybe win a Nobel Prize if you had solved this problem.
And it also can be applied into a number of different areas. So now that the technology has been introduced, there's industries, multiple industries that are looking at how to apply this, but it also opens up new industries. For example, micropayments. It's now feasible, it's now possible to send small amounts of money digitally. So, for example, a fraction of a penny. One of the issues that you see is, and this is a great way to address financial inclusion. If you ever go to, for example, the gas station and you want to buy a pack of gum, there's normally a sign right next to the credit card machine that says you have to spend at least $10 to scan a credit card. And the reason being is because the merchant has fees they have to pay every time they swipe a card. Well, when you're using this peer-to-peer technology, those fees come down drastically, which opens up a whole new possibility of transactions called microtransactions. So it also opens up new areas of commerce, and will also begin to address a lot of the financial inclusion issues that we have.
I also have heard a lot of people in the online content community who, are really popular bloggers, or they have a really popular YouTube channel like me, whereas in the past, people might have been hesitant to give money on a credit card with a PayPal donation or something like that. They can instead, give micropayments with Bitcoin or some other type of digital currency instead.
That's absolutely right. And there are some media providers that actually allow their contributors to post their Bitcoin wallet address next to their article, and if you like what they wrote, or you like their art, or you like what they're posting, you can send the artist or the author directly a contribution for that article. This is going to completely transform the media industry, the IT industry, and the arts, because it puts the ownership back in the power of the artist or the content creator.
Yeah, I think I heard there's a few popular musicians who are releasing their articles, who are releasing their albums or individual songs, and they're accepting Bitcoin for them. I want to ask you now about all the investment in Bitcoin. There's been over $1 billion invested into the blockchain infrastructure by Silicon Valley, Wall Street, large corporations since Bitcoin became more popular in 2010, 2011. Also, I've heard from Gavin Andreessen of the Bitcoin Foundation that I think many millions of free computer programmers have put, free hours into improving the code. So what do you see these investments doing for the future of Bitcoin and blockchain technology?
Well, the money's going into startups around the globe that are building out various use cases and capabilities for blockchain. Some are financial in nature, other are not. So blockchain is a platform which many other applications can be built upon. So similar to the internet, one of the first consumer applications of the internet was email, which, by the way, it took over a decade for the industry to figure out email, to build it and adopt it. Just as the internet is greater than email, blockchain is greater than digital currency. This technology can be used to transfer other digital assets above and beyond just currency. So technologists at startups around the world are currently building and experimenting with blockchain-based technology for various capacities. And at the Chamber, I have the privilege of seeing all sorts of types of business models across a wide range of industries, including banking, insurance, healthcare, IP, and beyond. And as a community, we're still navigating through what that killer app is going to be and what industry it's going to be in.
I think when I see how Bitcoin could potentially save the financial industry an enormous amount of money, we're talking like it could cut costs 50% or more across the board in some instances, because, with remittance or credit card payments, or even if you're wiring money from my bank to your bank, I'm paying you back for something. I mean, there's all these middlemen involved in the current financial system now who, my bank would charge me $50 for a wire transfer. Then there's a middleman. Then there's, days and days of clearing for the transaction to go through, and blockchain promises, to settle these transactions in a couple hours or two, sometimes even less, and cut the amount of fees involved down by as much as 90%.
That's one side of the conversation. So how can you use blockchain technology? And companies all around the world are looking at different types of use cases and how it's going to be relevant. And one argument is, well, we can save money and greater efficiencies. It will cut down back office costs. The reports that we have seen, most of them that have come out of the banks, those numbers are in the billions. So the Bank of Santander, their report stated they believe they can save up to $20 billion a year with using blockchain technology. So that's one side of the conversation. But if we take that one step forward and how blockchain technology can be used and to create new industries, like how I mentioned with micropayments, but also new types of business models that we haven't really seen before, I think those numbers are going to be in the trillions. So it's hard to predict what that $1 trillion unicorn, I don't even know what you would call a $1 trillion unicorn, whatever comes after the unicorn, what that's going to be. So while it's interesting, we think we can save a lot of money with this. What else can we do with this above and beyond that's actually going to take us to a whole another level?
Yeah, that's a great ideas right there. I actually interviewed Dominic Frisby, who published one of the first Bitcoin books, and he talked about the invention of blockchain compared to the guy who invented plastics. And the initial invention of plastic was just for electrical wire coating, because the original material was some type of beetle. It was, a bug. And so, look at all the thousands of different uses that after the one use for plastics that got it in the door, that got the investment in, and then all the other innovation and experimentation that came after, and all the different things that plastics are now using and making our lives better and more efficient.
Well, maybe for us, but not for the dolphins.
Oh, yeah, that's the thing with technology, Perianne. It creates new problems too. So the robots are the robot attacks of the robots are a little scary. I want to ask you now. Last year, you attended a Federal Reserve annual meeting in DC. where central banks from over 90 countries also attended to learn more about Bitcoin and blockchain technology. Do you think countries like the U.S. are planning on rolling out government digital currencies using blockchain technology in the near future?
I think that is the trillion-dollar question right there. I did get to attend a very interesting meeting with Janet Yellen, where she invited us and a couple of our members to present to over 90 central banks around the world on blockchain technology, and that was really an amazing opportunity to get to be a part of. I don't think the Fed is rolling out a blockchain-based currency for the public's use right now. I'm just not seeing any indications of that. But other central banks around the world are exploring this. The Bank of Canada certainly is. This is a part of the overall evolution of finance. I do think that's a really probably one of the most interesting conversations we can have is how is this going to affect monetary policy? And if central banks begin adopting blockchain-based digital currencies or payments for the public's use, how is that going to change monetary policy overall? And I would say it will be drastic, and it really can make huge improvements to the overall global monetary system. And it also could shape the balance of powers as well.
I see positives of the ability to use more digital currency and pay with your smartphone. But what worries me, though, is governments with legal tender laws, governments forcing people into this. I'm not sure if you've seen any of these books that have come out by these academic economists like Kenneth Rogoff and Larry Summers talking about how they need to ban cash, how anyone using a $100 bill or a $20 bill or even a $10 bill paying cash for to go buy a cup of coffee or go buy lunch is a potential criminal or a drug dealer. So for governments, obviously I think people as a libertarian should have a choice. So if you want to pay with your smartphone and use Bitcoin or another type of digital currency, you want to pay with cash, you want to use your gold money account for that, you should have the option to do that. But it worries me that government would take the blockchain technology, which technology is not inherently good or bad in my opinion, but someone could take a technology and use it for nefarious purposes. So I am worried about blockchain being used for cashless society purposes, and increasing taxes on people, and maybe forcing people to use government currency even though they know it's being inflated.
Well, there's another side to that argument as well. Look, what we call money today, we take trees, we smash them into a pulp, and then the government says this is your money. That really does not make sense in a digital economy. And like I said, with the introduction of the internet, this has completely transformed the way we conduct business. However, the internet is really not a safe place to transfer value. The massive amounts of data breaches and cybersecurity attacks and hacks are a huge testament to this. We need some type of digital asset and a rail that we can use to safely and securely transfer value in a modern day digital economy. However, the balance here is privacy and security, and I do think blockchain-enabled technologies, potentially could provide that privacy and security to enable this in a way where constituencies are not, can actually take control of their purchasing power and their privacy.
Yeah, I think, Bitcoin and blockchain technology has really helped saving people's lives right now. I'm not sure if you saw any of the articles in Reason magazine lately, but they were interviewing, anonymous Bitcoin miners down in Venezuela who were able to buy food for their families and protect themselves from starvation because of the hyperinflation in Venezuela. We had the demonetization scheme in India, so the Bitcoin usage demand exploded there because of Modi all of a sudden just deciding that almost 90% of all the cash and money supply in the country was worthless, and people had to wait in long lines to hand their cash back into the bank. So I think Bitcoin right now in a lot of those developing countries where the governments are abusing the privilege of their money, it's definitely the potential is there with the technology to save people's lives.
And we have an Indian delegation coming to the DC Blockchain Summit on March 15th and 16th. The CEO of the Bombay Stock Exchange is giving a keynote address, and we will be talking about this in front of government leaders all around the world at the summit. So please join us at Georgetown University to continue that discussion, and it's certainly a point we will be raising.
Excellent, and I definitely look forward to attending that. I didn't make the last year's one, but I'm really excited to go to the one next month. I want to ask you about smart contract usage. Obviously, there's a lot of lawyers. I was a lawyer for a little bit before I dropped out of law school. I think there's too many lawyers in the United States. How efficient do you think smart contracts can make the U.S.'s legal system?
So funny. I debated going to law school as well, and as I mentioned, I was in school during the financial collapse, so many people just decided to go into law school because there really were not enough jobs. So we still have a huge oversaturation of lawyers. Smart contracts certainly is going to evolutionize the legal industry as well. Again, as we're moving to a more modern day digital economy and moving towards this movement of digital commerce, that the legal industry is going to continue to do so as well. So smart contracts, having this idea of computer code being automatic and enforceable, that's certainly where a lot of business processes are going. In finance, insurance, potentially in healthcare as well. I just actually finished a meeting with a top accounting firm, and we were kind of debating. I see the legal and the accounting industries merging over time. As codes become, or as contracts become code, and as contracts become automated, you'll need auditors to review those, not just attorneys. So this is going to transform a lot of business processes. It'll create a lot of efficiencies, but there'll have to also be an evolution between the legal, but also the accounting industry, which has a huge opportunity here as well.
That's very interesting that you think that they would combine. That would make angry a lot of accountants and lawyers who are getting paid very high hourly rates.
Well, we work with a lot of lawyers at the chamber, a lot of outside firms, in-house counsel, and others. Surrounded by lawyers here in my role at the chamber, and I always joke with the lawyers. No one really knows what the future of blockchain is going to look like. It's a work in progress, but it is very clear that everyone needs a lot of legal help. So the lawyers are actually doing great.
Yeah, and to add to your point there, I mean, the amount of lawyers here in DC, I think other than maybe New York City, it's the largest concentration of lawyers on the planet. So. Okay, well, I've seen Wall Street banks are currently testing their own private blockchains. Do you think there will be exchanges that use blockchain technology for record keeping of stock trades?
All right, I'm going to turn this question back around. So do you think we need exchanges if we can use blockchain technology to issue stocks? So to elaborate on this, Overstock, which is one of our executive members, is really the pioneer of this idea. Overstock has a subsidiary called T0. It's a blockchain-based trading platform, and Overstock has issued shares of its own stock on this crypto securities platform. So to answer your question, yes. And the industry is already evolving even beyond that concept.
That's very interesting. I've interviewed Patrick Burns a couple times over the years and spoken with him about that. I know, he did a documentary on short selling on Wall Street, and they pretty much hated him since he's done that. I know the SEC, attacks him and basically he has to spend all this extra money protecting himself against the SEC because hedge fund managers told him that he was going to be targeted once he released the documentary on short selling. I mean, yeah, there's just so many problems, Perianne, with the stock exchanges right now. with counterparty risk, with naked short selling. There's rehypothecation problems. There's manipulation of so many markets right now, and I don't think the regulators are doing a good job. I'm optimistic that the digital currency blockchain, if there is, it could potentially solve some of these problems.
Well, there are some regulators who've been thought leaders in this conversation as well, most notably the CFTC acting chairman, Christopher Giancarlo, who has actually put forward his own approach to blockchain regulation, which he calls do no harm. And he has addressed this in a lot of his public remarks over the years. And he's talked about transparency in the system. I mentioned earlier that blockchain technology allows for radical transparency, and that certainly could be applied in the securities industry as well. I'll never forget a speech that I had that I watched of Giancarlo, where he said, "Here we are," and this was last year, in 2016, and we still don't have transparency into these systems. And this was the whole purpose of Dodd-Frank. So I am very optimistic as well that this technology is going to solve a lot of those issues. But I think that conversation actually has to happen within the regulatory community as well. Just as industry is evolving, as technology is evolving, the regulators are going to have to evolve too, and we want them to be a part of that process.
Excellent. And that leads me a tie into my last question for you in this interview. Since you've spoken with a lot of government regulators, either in New York or in DC at the federal level, are you worried that government bureaucrats and regulators will tax and regulate Bitcoin to the point where it becomes too punitive to even use? Because let me give you an example of that. So when people trade Bitcoin now, I think if you're an American, even if you pay for a cup of coffee with Bitcoin, you're supposed to track your capital gains for just paying with a cup of coffee, when you bought the Bitcoin and when it was sold to pay for the coffee. I think obviously there's some software that can handle that, but if you're a little guy trying to do that, that sounds pretty cumbersome. Do you think the regulators are going to allow this technology to progress without, killing it or choking it off in the crib?
I am worried about that, and that's exactly why I started the chamber. You're absolutely right. I mean, if we want to talk about tax treatments, we do have pretty serious issues with the IRS. The IRS is also attacking Coinbase and has asked Coinbase to hand over all of their customers' records, which is really a gross overstep of power in the way that they're taxing Bitcoin. They tax it as property. It really does not make sense. We have put forward some efforts to better engage with the IRS to give them some greater tools. But you know what? We also have something else. I guess a greater tool that we can use is the IRS's Attorney General published a report last year that said, the IRS needs to put forward a virtual currency compliance program, and the IRS has not done that. And in the meantime, they're going after companies saying they're not complying. So we have a lot of issues with the IRS. Above and beyond that, from a regulatory perspective, it's not just with the IRS, it's with the government more broadly. My biggest fear here is that it's so difficult to navigate the regulatory regime in the United States that all the innovation is just going to leave this country. And we're already seeing that happening. So because our government is, on the federal level, we have a very decentralized approach. It's very different than most countries. We have our own securities regulator, the SEC. We have our own, you have the CFTC overseeing the futures industry. We have a separate regulator that oversees money laundering. We have a separate regulator that oversees sanctions, another one overseeing tax. All of these different regulators have their own views on how they interpret blockchain technology. For example, the CFTC has said Bitcoin is considered a commodity. The SEC is looking at this through the lens of a security. IRS has said it's property, and FinCEN treats it like currency. Funny enough, caveat, they won't actually call it currency, but they regulate it like currency. So I just gave you 4 different ways of which you can look at this from a regulatory perspective, from a commodity, a security, property, and currency. So if you're a company using blockchain technology for name your use case, where do you start? Where do you go? How do you navigate through this? No one knows. And it's even a bigger issue on the state level. We have 48 states that regulate money transmission. It's a felony to operate in a state if it requires one, so you have to get licensed. However, the states have been completely inadequate in terms of explaining how, what types of technologies fall within scope of these regulations. We can't get companies licensed here in the United States. They can't operate here. I've had member companies that are founded by Americans. They've raised money by American VCs. They can't get licensed in the U.S., and they've moved to Asia. So Silicon Valley is moving from California to Asia. It's a big challenge, and if we are not able to streamline these regulatory processes and better define and articulate where blockchain fits into the regulatory system, we risk losing innovation and brain drain.
Excellent points. I actually have a few Bitcoin and blockchain entrepreneur friends who had to move their business to Panama a couple of years ago too. They just couldn't deal with the headaches that you so mentioned in so many different details. It sounds like you mentioned earlier in the interview about the lawyers that they were going to have plenty of work. It sounds like, the first thing you have to do if you're going to be a blockchain entrepreneur is you have to hire a bunch of lawyers instead of hiring computer programmers to go and create a business and provide value.
Yeah, and if you're a company that triggers those state laws, we estimate that it costs anywhere between $2 and $5 million a year just in legal and compliance costs to deal with the state regulatory issues. So by definition, you really can't be a startup and operate in this space. No startup has that type of capital to spend on regulatory issues. So it's sad. It's really affecting us competitively globally, and something I'm certainly worried about, and something that I'm fighting for every day in DC.
So you said that you noticed that a lot of the investment money that's coming from large corporations and Wall Street and Silicon Valley, it's going to entrepreneurs outside the United States then?
Well, some of it is. A large part of that money, there's a venture capital report on that CoinDesk does, and I think the last time I looked, it was about 70% of the investment in the space is coming from American investors. But we are certainly seeing a lot of those startups beginning to have to go and operate in other jurisdictions.
Excellent. Well, I enjoyed our conversation today, Perianne. Please tell our listeners how they can follow your work at the Chamber of Digital Commerce, and also more about your conference that's coming up basically a month from today, the DC Blockchain Summit.
The DC Blockchain Summit is on March 15th and 16th at Georgetown University. You can visit digitalchamber.org to learn more. And on March 14th, the day before, we are co-hosting a blockchain and healthcare codeathon with the Department of Health and Human Services Office of the National Coordinator. So we're going to have a codeathon. Registration is open now. The public is able to enter. And then the summit will be the 2 days after that.
Excellent, and I'm looking forward to going. You have keynote speakers, including Blythe Masters and also Don Tapscott, who wrote a pretty good book about Bitcoin and the blockchain that I recommend our listeners take a look at. I think it's available on audiobook on Audible.
Yep, that's Blockchain Revolution by Don and Alex Tapscott.
Excellent, Perianne. Well, I look forward to speaking to you in the future then as more news stories come out about the industry. I think it seems to me like it's not really an investment opportunity in terms of investing maybe in some of these blockchain infrastructure companies for a retail investor, because it's still, angel investors and VCs. But I look forward to watching the industry progress as it grows and matures.
Well, thanks so much. And I look forward to continuing to keep this dialogue open with you on Wall Street for Main Street.
Mo and I are trying to raise $1,000 per month for our Patreon account. We have over 2,600 viewers per YouTube video, so if we can get most of our loyal listeners or all of our loyal listeners to donate $1 per month or up to $5 per month, which would be amazing, that would cover most, if not all, of the money that we need. So we also accept one-time donations. If you go to the wallstreetformainstreet.com website, we accept donations in cash via PayPal, fiat, you can donate there. You can donate Bitcoin through our Bitcoin wallet there on the website, or you can donate gold and silver. We have a gold money account, and we also accept mail donations